Hello everyone, welcome back to the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. My name is Michaela and this is podcast episode number 34. Thank you so much for clicking on this video, whether you're a new or a returning viewer. I haven't introduced myself properly in a while, so if you are new, as I said, my name is Michaela and I'm a knitter from Dublin, Ireland. I'm a scientist, hence the channel name Stitches in STEM, which is a play on women in STEM, as I am a woman in STEM. When I'm not working, I have a lot of hobbies to keep me occupied. Number one, obviously, being knitting. I also do pole fitness, I play video games, and I have a dog called Reggie who I love very much and I love hanging out with. I've been knitting since August 2023 and I was crocheting for about 2 years before that, so I started during the pandemic like a lot of people. And here on YouTube I like to talk about anything that I've been knitting, things I've recently finished and any future plans I have. My most recent video was the highs and lows of 2025, so if you're new to the channel and you want to see more of the kind of projects that I make, I definitely recommend clicking on that one because that will show kind of the major projects that I completed last year. And with the introduction out of the way, let's get into my first finished object of the day. These are my striped advent socks, which I completed using Freckled Whimsy advent yarn from 2022. So this was sent to me by a viewer, Melissa. Thank you again, Melissa. I had an absolute blast making these and I'm so grateful that you sent me this lovely yarn. I have already worn them, so I won't show them too close up, but I'll also pop a photo up here so you can see the stripes a little bit better. These were knit toe up and I knit a fleegle heel for the first time. When I've knit toe up socks before, I've tried a shadow wrap heel and a fish lips kiss heel and a German short row heel, none of which I felt fit really well on me, so I tried a fleegle heel and I'm pleased to report that these fit really well. I'll definitely be using a fleegle heel as my go-to for toe-up socks in the future, although these are a tiny little bit tight, but I can get them on, but they just feel a bit snug once they're on. I had 56 stitches in the round and just before the heel I increased to 64 because I do have a high instep. I didn't really account for the fact that the increases on a fleegle heel start quite far up the foot, and so 56 stitches around this part of the foot was still too tight around my instep. And I should have increased sooner on the foot. So next time I make toe-up socks, I'll just increase sooner on the foot, but otherwise I'm pretty happy with the fit around the heel. In the last episode, I talked about how the socks are designed with a 24 stripe sequence, and knowing how much my socks usually weigh, I figured that my socks would be 16 stripes. And at that point I was already on stripe 10 and I was about halfway up the foot. So I was really confused because I knew that stripe 16 would place me around here and I didn't understand how I would get a full length sock out of that. However, a few viewers commented and told me that it is designed to be knit with a contrasting toe, heel and cuff with 12 stripes on the foot and 12 stripes on the leg. So that makes a lot more sense and it suddenly explained to me why I was already on stripe 26 or something and I hadn't even gotten to the cuff yet. I did also look at the Freckled Whimsy Instagram and I looked at photos that she had been tagged in. I scrolled all the way back to 2022 to see what people had done, and indeed everyone had knit their advent socks that year with a contrast cuff, heel and toe. I can honestly say that I am delighted with how these turned out. I am not bothered at all by the fact that there's, how many stripes? 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33 stripes. And also the fact that the stripes get a little bit thinner around the heel and that the fleegle heel obviously has this colour blocking going on. None of that bothers me. I think these are just so fun. I had the best time working them up and I love wearing them too. It just brings me so much joy to see these stripes. This is very specific, but this particular sequence here, the dark pink to this kind of bright green here, reminds me of a Barney movie I used to watch when I was a kid, and maybe some of you will know this movie. In the movie there was a magic egg and it had a stripe sequence that I think looks exactly the same as these four colours here. And I completely forgot about that movie until I started knitting this sock and it just like unlocked a memory for me. So yeah, those are my advent socks. I didn't really knit them according to advent. I think I started on the 4th of December and at that point I did knit up to stripe number 4. And I kept on top of it doing a daily stripe until I reached maybe stripe number 10. Once I reached the heel, I knew I wouldn't be able to stick to a daily stripe because I knew I would kind of want to do the heel all in one go. I also had a few cinema trips over the Christmas break and these were my only stockinette project, so I kind of gave up on doing a stripe a day just so I could have something to knit while we were in the movies. I forgot to mention what I'm wearing, but this is my Monday sweater, which is a pattern by Petite Knit. I think I've worn this a few times on the podcast. It's probably one of my most worn jumpers. I'll just show you the colour pattern. I used a hand-dyed yarn from Pigment and Ply and I held it with Filcolana in the colour Freesia. I'll link the project page for this down below, as well as the podcast episode where I talk about it as a finished object. My next finished object is another pair of socks, and I just finished these this morning, so I haven't blocked them or woven in the ends. So I just placed them on blockers so you can see them more clearly. This pattern is called Hines 4-ply and it's from Ready Set Socks, which is a pattern book by Rachel Coopy. The yarn is from the Olivia and Oliver Fibres sock set advent calendar from 2024. The advent calendar had 5 sock sets in it. I destashed one, but I kept the remaining 4, and I finally got around to casting on with them this winter. Each set was themed after a different season, so there's spring, summer, autumn and winter. And as you might guess, this is the winter colourway. So I cast these on at the end of November because I just felt that they were very seasonally appropriate, and I love this kind of cool, crisp winter colour scheme that she's got going on with this colourway. The base is quite a neutral pale grey pink kind of colour, and there's washes of desaturated pinks and blues going through it. And there's also the odd speckle of a very, very dark navy or almost black. The pattern is charted. It's a 6-row repeat involving just knitting and purling to get this lovely texture. I did mention in the last episode how there is a different chart for the left and right sock. I still can't see any difference at first glance. If I look closely, I can see the difference, but it's not enough to make me pause and think about which sock to put on which foot once I actually start wearing them. I'm just going to wear them whatever way I want. With these socks, I actually did a decrease in the middle here. I don't know if you can see here. There it is. I decreased from 64 stitches down to 56. As I said, I have a high instep, but I do find the 64 stitches is generally too wide around the ball of my foot, so I like to decrease down to 56 for that part. And these actually took me a while to knit. As I said, I cast them on at the end of November. I only finished them today, so that took me a month and a half. I would say it's about 7 weeks maybe, which is quite long for me for a pair of socks, but I enjoyed knitting them all the same. Towards the end, I did kind of feel like they were hanging over me a little bit, that I needed to push myself to finish them. But I think they're absolutely lovely. This is probably my favourite sock set in the whole advent, so I had that motivation to finish them. So yeah, those are my Hines 4-ply socks. All of the patterns in that Ready Set Socks book come in a 4-ply or an 8-ply version. I only ever really knit 4-ply for myself. If I was gifting socks, I'd be open to knitting 8-ply or DK weight socks just because they would knit up that bit faster. But for myself, I really only stick to fingering weight. I do think the book is really good. It has 10 patterns and this is the second pattern that I've knit. It does start off with a vanilla sock pattern, which I actually haven't followed that one myself, but it does have cables, lace. There's a mosaic knitting pattern in there as well, and then of course a textured sock like this, and a few other socks that kind of combine different techniques. My last finished object was a gift knit, but I do have it, and it is a Sophie scarf that I showed in the last episode. This was a Christmas gift from my mum. I have given it to her obviously because we are well past Christmas and she's worn it loads. I knit this in Stainless Garn Sunday in the colour Jazzy Pink, and I used a total of 4 balls, but I did hold 2 strands together. It's a fingering weight yarn, so holding 2 strands together gave me DK weight gauge. I'm not sure if I said this was a Sophie shawl or Sophie scarf. I don't own the shawl pattern, but I do own the scarf pattern, and I just increased more frequently so that it would get wider faster. This is my 5th Sophie shawl / scarf that I've made. I really love this pattern. I know people complain about it, that's too simple and that it shouldn't be a paid pattern. It's by Petite Knit, by the way, if you didn't know, but I'm guessing everyone knows that. It gets a bit of criticism because people say it's so simple that it should be free, but I actually disagree with that. I knit a Sophie scarf when I first started knitting. I didn't know how to increase, I didn't know how to do an integrated I-cord, and even if I did know how to do those things, I wouldn't have known how to incorporate them and self-draft my own triangular scarf with an integrated I-cord. So I was happy to pay for it. I definitely got value for money, especially considering I've made it 5 times since. I know there is a very similar free version on Ravelry. I didn't come across that when I first started knitting, so I just bought the Sophie scarf pattern. But if the free version works for you, then by all means go for it. My mum loved this and she's worn it loads, so this was a very successful gift. So those were my finished objects, and now we'll move on to whips. My first whip is a self-drafted Aran cabled jumper that I'm basing on a jumper that used to belong to my granddad. I showed pictures of the jumper in the last episode, but I have it with me in person, so I don't know why I didn't show it in person, but this is it. This is the front. It's got these 2 diamond motifs on either side of the center panel. This center panel looks like this because it was damaged by moths and I didn't know how to knit at the time, so we got it replaced and repaired, but they obviously used a different colour yarn. And they also did a double moss stitch for the centre panel, which I don't mind, but the original panel was, as you can see on the back, a honeycomb panel. So the back is a more accurate representation of what the jumper looked like, and this is the way that I'm going to recreate it. This was knit bottom up, and I'm assuming it was machine knit in panels and sewn together. I'm knitting mine top down, and I'm starting with a typical trapezoid shape for the back yoke, after which I'll just extend the back until I reach the underarm point. Then I'll pick up for the front shoulders, shape the front neckline, join under the arms, and then continue in the round. The yarn that I'm using is Explorer Knits and Fibres Rockies DK in the colour Avenoir, which is this really dark purple. I think in some lights it looks navy, but in person it's definitely a more purple than a blue. And in the last episode I had started the back yoke, but I had already made a mistake and I needed to frog it. That was maybe a month ago, and because I had gift knits and a test knit to work on, I just didn't give it any attention, and I only recently picked it back up. And only yesterday I finished the back yoke again, and I'm so proud of this. I think this looks so good, and this is absolutely keeping me motivated to keep going with this, just seeing these cables come to life. So the cables featured here are obviously the honeycomb panel in the middle, and then on either side of that we've got a column of twisted stitches, a 2x2 cable, another column of twisted stitches, and then we've got a big diamond panel, and then we've got another one of those twisted stitch, 2x2 cable, twisted stitch kind of motifs. And finally on the outside there is double moss stitch. There's a couple of differences between my jumper and the original jumper. The original jumper has two of these twisted stitch and cable motifs on the outside of the diamond pattern, and it also has a much wider double moss stitch panel than mine does. But I don't have enough stitches in the width of my jumper to include those motifs, so I just have one twisted stitch and cable kind of column, and I have a much smaller double moss stitch section as well. I think mine is only 6 stitches across, and you actually can't really see it here because I just haven't worked it up at all yet. I'm tempted to do a mid-project block on this just to make sure that my calculations are on track and that it works out to be the size that it's supposed to be. I think it should be okay, but I just want to be super certain before I continue because it did take me quite a while to get to this point. I have a feeling this is going to take a while to knit up, so you will see it on a lot of podcast episodes and it will be around for a while, but I'm really enjoying it and I'm really motivated by the idea of finishing it and seeing what it looks like. I especially love the twisted stitch columns. I know twisted stitches can be a bit of a pain to work. I personally don't hate them. I don't love them. They're just fine. I don't find them particularly tedious, but I think in this pattern they're really worth it. I think they give a really elegant look to that motif on either side of the honeycomb panel. So you can definitely expect to see a lot more of this in the coming episodes. And I mentioned it before, but in case you're new here, I do plan on making a video tutorial for this and also releasing a free pattern. I've had a few people ask me why I would release this as a free pattern and not a paid pattern if I'm putting this amount of work into it. The main reason is that I just want to give something back to the knitting community. I feel really grateful to have my channel here on YouTube and to have people who watch and comment on my videos regularly. And of course, I want more and more people to experience the joy of knitting. So this is my way of enticing people into the knitting community. My last whip is a new cast on. I cast this on in that awkward time between Christmas and New Year's when you forget what day it is. And this is the side bow slipover, which is a pattern by Sarah Antipenkov or Noelle Knits. This pattern was gifted to me by a viewer when I was talking about my knitting slump in one of my episodes. So thank you very much. This definitely helped get me out of my knitting slump. And the yarn that I'm using is Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino in the colour Midnight, and I got this as a Christmas present from my parents. As the name suggests, this is a slipover with side bows for ties, which I obviously haven't worked yet. So I've just finished the back panel, I finished the ribbing and I bound off with a tubular bind off, and I'm about halfway down the front panel. Actually, I'm slightly more than halfway down the front panel. I don't have much left to do before starting the ribbing. The ribbing on the front panel is also supposed to be a good bit shorter than on the back panel. And then once I've done that, I'll pick up around the neckline to work the collar and then finally work the double knit side ties. I'll pop a picture up of the pattern here because I'm aware this doesn't look like much. This has been a very, very quick knit and it was the perfect project for me to cast on when I needed an immediate cast on. I had said before that my next cast on was going to be the Chantal sweater by Moreka Knit, but that involved winding up another skein of yarn, whereas with this one, the Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino was ready to go. And I've knit with it before, so I knew what my gauge was, so I didn't need to gauge swatch. My gauge is actually slightly bigger than the pattern gauge. The pattern gauge is 20 stitches and 10 centimeters, and mine is around 18.5 stitches and 10 centimeters. So I am knitting the size down when it comes to stitch counts. I'm knitting the size 2 as opposed to 3. All of the lengths in the pattern are given in centimeters, so I am knitting to the lengths described for the size 3, which is my actual size. The pattern's supposed to have 4 inches of positive ease, and I calculated that at my gauge, knitting the size 2, I'll still get that 4 inches of positive ease around the bust. As I said, this knit up really quickly, and I think it's partly due to it feeling like you have to knit it in sections. For the back panel, you start with the back neck and you increase to shape the yoke. Then you work straight for a while before starting waist increases, so that already feels like you have another section to work through. And then you have to do a certain number of waist increases, so mentally I was checking those off as I went. And then finally you work straight for another little bit before starting the ribbing. Each of the straight sections are actually not that long, so it really does feel like you're getting through each section quite fast. The part that did feel long was the ribbing, so there's 10 centimeters of ribbing at the bottom. And for some reason that just felt like it took a while for me. I kept measuring it and it just didn't seem like it was growing at all, but eventually I got there and I worked a nice tubular bind off to get a seamless edge. I had to take off that jumper, it was too warm. For the stockinette portions I used a 4mm needle, but for the ribbing on the bottom I used a 3mm. I also did my usual trick of introducing a few increases so that the ribbing doesn't cinch too much. Originally, I increased every 7 stitches just before starting the ribbing. However, that was definitely too much and the ribbing started to flare out a bit. So I undid it and I restarted it, introducing an increase every 10 stitches instead of every 7 stitches. And I think it looks good so far, but once I block it, then I'll be able to know for sure, because if it grows with blocking, I think the ribbing panel will be too big for the stockinette panel and it will like flare out. So for that reason, I'm not going to work the ribbing on the front just yet. I'm going to do everything else, the collar, the side bow ties, everything. And then I'm going to block it and see if the ribbing grows or stays the same. There are a couple things with this slip over that I don't think worked out very neatly for me, and I kind of wish that they looked a bit nicer, and I'm kind of hoping that blocking will fix. Number 1, the pickup edge on the front shoulder. Along here, I think this looks quite untidy, and again, I'm hoping that blocking will fix it. The other thing is the front and the back both have this ribbed panel on the outside. Before blocking, it's just kind of flipping in so you can't see it. So if I hold it out, you can see it. I don't think my ribbing is very neat, and I also know that my selvage is not neat. However, this whole selvage will be picked up and knit into a double knit edge. However, where this paper clip is the end of my waist increases. That's where the double knit side bow ties are going to go, and they're going to kind of be incorporated into that double knit edge going up the top, which means that anything below that paper clip, there's not going to be anything attached to it. And I think it looks quite untidy. This isn't going to be a problem for everyone. It's just for me, my tension or something must not have been very good. But if I could do it over, I would do like a slip stitch selvage instead, just to make it a little bit neater. I also think that I got 2 different dye lots. I definitely got 2 different dye lots. It's less noticeable in person than it is on camera. I only notice it in certain, like looking at it right now, I actually can't see it, but I can see it on the viewfinder. So it exists. I no longer have the ball band for the first ball of yarn that I use, so I can't double check, but I can tell just by looking at them that they're different dye lots. It doesn't particularly bother me. As I said, I don't think it's too noticeable, and maybe when I block it and wash it, some of that dye will kind of blend a bit better. As for where I am now, I cast on for my double knit ties yesterday. And although the slip over so far has been quite a quick knit, once I started knitting those double knit ties, I could see that it's no longer going to be a quick knit. This is going to take me a while, and I'm okay with that. I actually don't mind double knitting. However, I do think I need to restart this. The pattern specifies a gauge for the double knitting, and it also says in the notes that it's very important that the row gauge for the double knitting is the same as the row gauge for the stockinette portion. I was initially confused by this because I didn't know if it meant row gauge in terms of the number of rows you work or the number of rows you see. Because with double knitting, every row that you see represents 2 rows worked. And when you're picking up stitches around the armhole, it instructs you to pick up every stitch for your double knitting. In the past, when I've done, say, a double knit button band, I think I've picked up 2 in every 3 stitches, and I go down 1mm in needle size. So I had knit the stockinette portion on 4mm needles, and if I was double knitting according to my own gauge and pickup rate, I would pick up 2 in every 3 stitches with a 3mm needle. However, because it made that comment about the row gauge and because it said to pick up every stitch, I tried to cast on. I decided to cast on with a 2.5mm needle and see what my gauge is. And after I had knit this much, I realised that by row gauge, it must have meant the number of rows that you can see. So I counted the number of rows that I could see in 10 centimetres, and my row gauge is actually tighter than my stockinette. So I need to redo this on larger needles, so I probably will stick with the 3mm. I was tempted to message the designer and ask if it's critical that we pick up every stitch and that your row gauge matches, or can I stick to my own kind of known double knitting gauge and pick up rate? But I think I'll be able to get the right gauge if I go up 0.5 millimeter in needle size. So I'm just going to do that and follow the pattern. So yeah, that is my side bow slipover pattern, kindly gifted by a viewer. Thank you so much. And making good progress on it. But now that I've started these double knit ties, I can see that it will take me a while. Moving on to acquisitions, we of course have just left the biggest gift giving season of the year, so I do have a few acquisitions to share with you. First off, the Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino in the colour Midnight that I mentioned was a gift from my parents. I also received 2 books which were on my wish list, 52 Weeks of Socks by Lina and 52 Weeks of Accessories, also by Lina. I had asked for volume 1 or volume 2 of the socks one. I didn't really mind, but they got me volume 1, which I'm delighted with. I've had my eye on this book for a long time. Same with the accessories one. I think I've wanted it since it came out, but I kept telling myself that I would wait and see if it went on sale or anything. I really loved the idea of the hardback version, but I think the hardback version is out of print because I just haven't seen it at all anymore. Maybe it was just something that they did for those first few months of the release. But I'm equally as happy with the paperback version, and yeah, I'm definitely very excited to have a look through this and pick some patterns to work on this coming year. I also bought some yarn for myself from Knitting for Olive. They always do an Advent sale, so each Sunday in Advent they put a different yarn on sale, and I think they add to it every Sunday. So like the first Sunday it might just be cotton merino, and then the second Sunday it'll be cotton merino and pure silk. So by the fourth Sunday pretty much their whole website is on sale. So I think on the third Sunday I picked up a few bits. The first yarn that I got was their cotton merino in the colour Linen. With this yarn I want to make the Mila vest by Sari Nordland. This has been on, I've had my eye on this pattern for a while. The original sample is knit in a darker brown colour, which I also think is stunning, but I wanted to do something different than what the sample was knit in, and I thought this would be a lovely colour to knit it in. I also ordered pure silk in the colours Powder and Wheat. I got these to make blouse number 1 by My Favourite Things Knitwear, and I plan to hold the two together. I actually saw someone on Ravelry make that exact top in these exact yarns, so I completely copied them. I'll put a picture up here. So one of the colours that I ordered was pure silk in the colour Powder, but they actually sent me by accident no waste wool in the colour Powder, and I did message them. I offered to send it back and asked if I could receive the pure silk instead. They sent out the correct pure silk colour, and they also told me to keep this. So I have 4 balls of no waste wool in the colour Powder. I have no idea what to do with this, but I'm sure I'll find a good use for it. And that is everything for today, so thank you so much for tuning in and for watching the video. If you have any questions or comments about anything, please leave them down below. I'll do my best to get back to you. I've been really enjoying my knitting lately. I know I talked previously about how I was in a bit of a slump, but I think I'm out of the slump now. I've been really excited to cast on my side bow slipover. My next project will definitely be my Chantal pullover now. My birthday is coming up in about 2 weeks' time, so I might save it for a birthday cast on and see how much I can get done of my other 2 whips in the meantime. If you didn't see my 2025 highs and lows, I mentioned at the end that I knit a lot less last year than I usually have in terms of the amount of yarn. So I knit up 6 kilos of yarn-ish instead of my usual 8 to 9, so it's pretty significant. In hindsight, I definitely didn't have as much knitting time as I had previous years, so it shouldn't be surprising. And I think this year is probably going to be the same. I will say I have a feeling my upload frequency is going to decrease a little bit. I have been very busy in work and in life, and I think things are only going to get busier for the next little while. I signed up to a High Rocks competition. Sorry, this is a bit of a life tangent. You can X out the video if you want now. But I signed up to a High Rocks race in March in Copenhagen. And if you don't know what High Rocks is, it's a race, but it involves strength workouts and running. So there's a ski machine, there's the rowing machine, you have to do lunges, you have to do burpees, other things as well. And then you also have to run a lot in it. I think most people in kind of my fitness level and age group finish in around an hour and a half. So I'm hoping to finish in around an hour and a half, but I have no idea. I haven't done like a simulation or anything, so I don't know what time I should really be aiming for. I am training a lot. I'm currently training 4 or 5 evenings a week, and that's after, coming home from work or like on the weekends. So I don't actually have a lot of knitting time at the moment, but I know that once the race is over, I'll be able to cut that down a bit and I'll get some of my knitting time back. I just want to see how well I can do if I really actually try and push myself and train and see what I can achieve. I think it'll be fun. And I also get a little trip to Copenhagen out of it, which will be, of course, nice. I think a trip to the Knitting for Olive store after my High Rocks race will be a very nice reward. All that to say, I have very little knitting time, which means I have even less time for recording and editing. Any free time I do have, I would much rather spend it knitting than editing. Also because if I don't knit, I have nothing to talk about. So my knitting is going to take priority over recording and editing. It might turn into a monthly upload, which, I mean, is not too bad. There's a lot of creators I watch who upload monthly and I really enjoy their monthly uploads. And I don't want to upload just for the sake of it either. So I'm not going to force myself to stick to a 2 or 3 week upload if I have nothing to talk about, because that wouldn't be enjoyable for anyone. All that to say, I hope you stick around for future videos. Please let me know if there's anything in particular you'd like to see. I do have my knitting mats video coming up. I'm planning that one out at the moment. Someone asked me if I would do a stash tour. If there's any interest in that, I would absolutely love to do a stash tour. It had crossed my mind before, but I had maybe incorrectly assumed that you guys were already familiar with my stash. A good chunk of it is the yarn that I got in Australia and New Zealand. So I only showed that a couple months ago, but I do of course have other yarns that I haven't shown. So if there's an interest in a stash tour, let me know and I'll definitely record that. Otherwise, I think that's it for today. So again, thank you so much for watching, for sticking around, and I hope to see you in the next episode. But until then, happy knitting. Bye.